I literally am so boring and I don't know how to make a video. Today's video I wanted to make about just showing you guys my digital art process. So I recorded the process of me making this Gale drawing, Gale from Baldur's Gate 3.
Practice tone betwixt the sheets.
We're just gonna be using that to walk us through my process. So before starting any drawing, I will scavenge through Pinterest searching for inspiration because I usually have no clue what the f I even want to draw or what I want it to look like. My goal is to find one reference for shape and perspective and anatomy and the other for lighting. I've seen artists who have a whole ass reference board of like 6 photos, but I don't know, that just feels a bit overwhelming for me personally. The way that I have learned throughout my years in drawing is by just copying from one reference. So even using 2 is an upgrade for me. In this case, I found this photo of Gale from Baldur's Gate 3 for the shape and perspective, and this other one for lighting, where he's kind of got like this purple light undercast. The next step is sketch, of course. My sketching process is a bit weird because it kind of combines both the sketch and the line art. First, I will start by just sketching out guidelines for the general perspective and shape of whatever it is that I'm drawing, in this case Gale. Then I lower the opacity of that layer and create a new layer for the next part of the sketch. In this step I am still quite messy with it because again I just want to get the general shape of things. Once that is done, I check that it is proportional to the reference, and in this case, as you can see, Gale was looking a little bit too long in the face, so I used the perspective transform tool to stretch him wider. Once I was happy with it, I lowered the opacity of this layer and created a new layer for the finished sketch slash line art. I don't like doing line art, and my art style doesn't contain line art in the finished piece, so line art for me just feels like a waste of time. If you like doing line art, then this is probably where you would add your line art. The third step is adding base colors. One thing I've learned is extremely important is to lay down the background before you start adding any colors and shading, etc., whatever it is, to the main subject, because I think you guys understand. I'm sure that you guys have experienced it yourself where you will start adding color and shit to the main subject and then you realize the background looks fucked up and you're like, okay, so now what do I do? And you have to like try to readjust everything. Yeah, don't do that. After I've laid down the basic background, based on the lighting reference, I try to identify a base color for each component of the main subject in the following order. So I start with skin, then hair, eyebrows, eye whites, irises, eyelashes, lips, clothes, and then accessories. Each of these components is added in a separate layer. Then onto the skin layer, I will add like any pigmentation that might be there. For example, any redness on the nose, ears, cheeks, and this includes any tiredness around the eyes or any scars on the skin. When I say tiredness, I don't know if anyone else is like this, but I like to add sort of like a grayish tone or like a purple tone to the under eye. Okay, so after that, this is fourth step now, we have shading. For shading, I create a new multiply layer, clip it to a folder containing every layer that we have made thus far of the main subject, and I will usually lower the opacity. Then I will select the parts of the subject that are shaded, referring to the reference. So using the select tool, just kind of outline that. To decide on the color for the shadow, I will look at what color the light is in the reference. In this case, it's like a light blue, like white light. Due to that, I used a dark orangey yellow color for the shadows in this case, since the light on Gale's face was light blue and purple. Yellow is the complementary color to purple, and orange is the complementary color to blue. And I remember learning something in school about the fact that the color of the shadows are supposed to be the complementary color to the light, or something like that. But I don't remember very well, so I could be completely wrong. Correct me in the comments if I am. Take this with a grain of salt because this has just worked for me. I don't know if it's necessarily right, but then I deselect this section after filling it with whatever color I had picked. Use the blur tool to soften some of the edges. I repeat this process for an additional 1 or 2 layers to progressively draw in the darker shadows. Once I am happy with the darkness, opacity, level of detail, and so on of each layer of shading, I move on to the highlights. So the 5th step is highlights. The process for highlighting is pretty much the same as the process for shading. However, the color I choose for the highlights is going to be a lighter shade of whatever the color of the light source is. In this case, there was a light that was bluish white coming from the left side of Gale. I selected the area of his face that was being lit up by the lighting. In an add layer this time, I filled whatever I selected. Then once again, you deselect, soften the edges, add another layer if needed to add some of the lighter highlights. And then in this case, I had to add sort of the undercast light with purple, which is the same thing, add layer. But this time I used a bit of like a darker color because when you use the add layer, it's going to give the effect of looking like lighting anyways, and it'll lighten whichever color you chose. And since this is light that is also in shadow, it will be darker and more vibrant, if that makes sense. And then around the edges of the highlights, I will add sort of like a pinky orange tone to give the skin some more color, because your character or person, whoever you're drawing, will look kind of lifeless. I add highlights to the eyes as well. And in this case, I didn't add the clothing until the very end, which I kind of saved the clothes for the rendering step because honestly, I'm just kind of shitty at drawing clothes. Definitely something I need to practice and am going to practice in the future, but as of right now, it's something that I just kind of leave until I can struggle with it at the end. So as you can see, it doesn't look the greatest, but once everything, the base of everything is laid down, I create a new drawing entirely in III's Paint. I will create a new canvas. I will save this image of whatever it is I have drawn thus far and then import it into this new canvas. And then I will just use the, what is that tool called? I will use the special tool, it's called, the liquify pen, to reshape his face, because I have a problem where when I'm drawing, it just, I don't know, I can't get shapes right in the moment that I'm drawing it, and then I look back and I'm like, why he looking a little bit disfigured, you know? So in this case, I had a lot of reshaping to do. I also wanted it to look like the angle was like coming from like up the bottom down here, like looking up, the camera angle, the perspective, you know? But I didn't really achieve that with my drawing. It kind of just looked like he was awkwardly like, so I tried to kind of fix that a little bit. Did my best. And the rendering process starts. So I always start with the eyes because I'm gonna be honest, I don't like rendering. I rely heavily on rendering in my drawing process. So that means like 70% of my drawing process is rendering, and it's just a lot of, it's very time consuming and very meticulous for me. So I start with the eyes to sort of just get myself going. There's a lot of emotion that can be conveyed through the eyes, so I feel like that's something that I find interesting enough to feel motivated to start drawing. Sort of trying to define everything. I don't really know how else to explain my rendering process other than I just am defining everything and trying to make lines sharper where they need to be, or adjusting colors or adding detail. So I usually start with the face. I go from the eyes to the eyebrows to the nose to the mouth to, in this case, I think let's see what I did. To the mouth, to just sort of fixing up his skin a little bit, adding a little bit more of a brighter light, trying to add a little bit of texture to his skin. The other thing I like to do in the rendering process is I will download the image as it is, and go into my images, and then basically desaturate the image so that it's black and white, and this will show me where in the image I need to add shadow. Tell me why my phone just stops recording in the middle of me recording. What was I talking about? Shit. ADHD brain, fucking empty in the head. What was I talking about? Literally fucking so dumb. Okay, I was talking about how I desaturate the image, look at it in grayscale to see where I need to add shading and highlights. So according to that, I noticed that Gail's neck was looking very flat, so I just went in and added like this darker brown color and then sort of tried to shape out his neck using like the purple lighting. That was kind of just guesswork. I don't really know how else to explain that part of the process. I just noticed that and then I changed that. Let me get my iPad. iPad kid, she needs her iPad. After I adjusted the neck, I added more lighting to the hair as well because I noticed that was looking a little bit flat. And then I defined his beard a little bit more. Just added some more dark hairs to it. I went in and did each stroke for each individual hair. By the way, I use pretty much 2 brushes for my entire process. I use this like watercolor hairbrush, which sounds weird, but it works for like pretty much everything for me at least. And then I use also it's called like Japanese script pen. I'm not really sure. That's the name of it, I think. And then I use airbrush, obviously. Then I kind of defined further his like weird, whatever this magical shit is on his face and his neck. And I added a little bit of texture to his skin, like just around this part of his face, because I could see that in the reference. He had like some texture here, so I wanted to add that in some way. I kind of still struggle with adding texture to the skin because the brushes that I have access to are kind of like shitty. So I should probably take the time to like customize my own brushes, but I don't feel like it, so. And then, I'm not gonna lie to you, I used the tools that I have access to. I traced, yes, I traced his clothes because I could not get the perspective right, and I was sick and tired of this drawing at this point. This was like 9 hours in, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna trace it, and I traced each individual. Okay, I traced one detail because there's like the pattern around the collar here, right? So I traced one of the details using like the Japanese smooth pen or whatever the fuck it's called, and then I duplicated that and then moved it over here, and then I used the mesh transform tool and like the perspective transform tool to like make it go around in the way that it's supposed to. Colored in the rest of that, added like the lighting and stuff. This was definitely guesswork. And then the background, I kind of finished up a little bit. I was very indecisive with like colors and stuff because I didn't want the whole drawing to just be like this one purple color, but I ended up choosing sort of like a bluish purpley color for the background. And yeah, that's pretty much it for my drawing process. I hope y'all found this video helpful. I guess one thing I will expand on a little bit is I had somebody ask me about skin, or how I draw skin. My main advice would be start with the base color, then add pigmentation. Do not forget to add pigmentation because it's just gonna look lifeless if you don't add pigmentation. And when I say add pigmentation, what I do is I will create a new layer on top of the skin. I will clip it to the skin. I will lower the opacity. I will choose like a pinkish, orangish color depending on what the skin tone is. And then when you're adding shading and stuff to the face, don't use black because that's gonna make it look even more gray. You want to use like a dark, well, as I had explained with the lighting situation, depending on what the lighting is, you will choose whichever color is complementary to that color of lighting. Along the edges of wherever the shadow is, like for example along the nose, I usually will add like pinkish, orangish color along there, or like along here, along the cheeks for sure. It just adds sort of a little bit more dimension and life to the character. And then the other thing is make sure to add texture. And in the rendering process, this means you're gonna have to zoom in and add detail, okay? You're gonna have to go in and add, if there's like you can see a pimple here, right? And some texture on my skin. You wanna add like little dots, right? And if you make them small enough that when you zoom out, it's not gonna look weird that it's like, oh, she has polka dots on her face. No, it's gonna look like texture. And yeah. There's also brushes that you can find. I personally am working on that, so I can't really give too much advice on that, but I know there are brushes that are good for adding texture to the skin. Advice for drawing hair. This is a blob, okay? It's not individual strands, it's a blob. It's a mass. You want to treat it as such, okay? So looking at me from far away right now, you're gonna want to, sorry, there's a hair in my mouth. You're gonna want to fill it in as a mass, and then you shade in the darker parts. There's darkness here, there's darkness up here, there's darkness here. And then you see this little shiny bit, then you add the lighting there, add the lighting there, add the lighting here, add the lighting there. And then when you're rendering, if it's looking one-dimensional, you want to add a little bit more dimension, then add a little bit lighter lights, so like lighter highlights, so like maybe just a little bit here, a little bit along the sides of my face. And then there's going to be stray hairs too, so you just want to add like around the edges, draw in each individual little like stray hair. Don't go too overboard, but definitely add that because it will add more realism to your drawing if that's what you're looking for. Once again, this is just what I do. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, like, I definitely have a lot of practice still to do, and I need to start practicing creating digital art of full body of characters, because I've mostly only been working on portraits so far, but I've just been trying to establish my skills. So if you guys have any more questions, please comment. I would love to answer them. If you found anything helpful in this video or just enjoyed listening to me ramble, please give it a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.